welcome back to another watch list, my weekly look or so at what I've been watching, and I've another absolutely jam-packed week, filled full of great movies and just titles to recommend to everybody going forward. So jam-packed, in fact, that I thought I may as well throw in an extra movie, because the first films I'm going to talk about are the Apu Trilogy by Sansa Ray. The story of a young Indian boy from birth straight through to, well, just before he finishes or hits his midlife crisis. It's from about 1950 period, and it's shot in monochrome, black and white. And the first film, Patha Panchali, I seen a while ago, as I try and space these things out. So Patha Panchali told the story of him being born into this family with a father and a mother and a sister and a granny auntie, one of those characters that's in there, and they live basically in poverty, as many films from around this time tend to be. They tend to tell a story of how things are hard, and Apu grows up in a family that lives on the outskirts and beside a family that's quite well off and quite rich. They live with very little means or otherwise, and it tells the story of Apu's relationships and influences from when he was young. So the things that he's seen when he was young, the things that influenced him when he was young, and the things that ultimately influenced who he was going to be, and primarily of those are the relationships that he had with his family. So there is his sister Durga, who very much takes Apu under her wing and shows him how she likes to live her life. She's an incredibly generous person, but turns out she's also a thief. She can't help but steal, mainly because I think they're poor and they don't have very much, but she takes. And this leads to some controversy within the first film itself. And aside from that, there's also the very strong presence of the mother, and the mother devotes her life to looking after her kids and disciplining them and trying to bring them up correctly. For even though they don't have much, they shall be brought up correctly. And on the side, there's an auntie who is a somewhat annoyance to the mother, who seems to scrounge and want basically all the time. She's an elderly woman, and she seems, like I say, is a bit of an annoyance to the mother. Durga, the daughter, loves her a great deal and will do anything for her, kind of speaking to her generous nature of the daughter. And there's a father, but the father's not really on the scene very much. He's working away from home, and you do not see him very much at all. And so tells the first story of Patha Panchali, right through to the end of some major life events that come. The second movie, Parahito, I think is probably how you pronounce it, Parahito maybe, tells the story of, well, young manhood, so straight through from maybe 7, 8, 9, that age, straight through to his teenage years, Apu, and tells a further development of the story and the characters that were in there, and concentrates a lot more on the relationship with the mother. The mother and the father are very prevalent at the start of the movie. They're very much there, and the family unit's very cohesive. If they moved away from the place where they were to where the Ganges were, and it's indicated actually that Ray wanted to move the location of the film to there so that people could see more of India and how influential the Ganges was as part of Indian culture at that time, were such a strong part of it. And it tells that story again through major life events, but it also culminates in a change in Apu, because Apu decides that he really wants to go to school, and he goes to school and learns and flourishes in it because he's very much invested in it. And it takes you right through to the end, to where he's coming at that stage of life, or that stage where he's reaching adulthood, where he wants to make his own choices in life. And I think Parahito is a film about transition. So it's really about transition from a boy to a man, and how he wants to take control of his own life and control of his own destiny, so to speak. So as a film, there are various plot points that are very important that hit through it. There are very important stages in it, but it doesn't have the sweeping arc of Patha Panchali, if you know what I mean. Some people will love the second film for the character development and that it explores the characters and motivations of each of the characters, but a lot of people see it as the lesser of the films, and a lot of people see it as Patha Panchali and another two films. I vehemently disregard that or disagree with that. The last film, Apu Trilogy, The World of Apu, tells the story of Apu as a man. So he's in Calcutta now, and he is trying to forge a life for itself. And you've seen an awful lot about, you know, studies and his relationships as he's growing up with his family, etc. But we haven't really seen the story of Apu and love. He's never really had a romantic relationship, so to speak, and that's part of the theme of, or the main theme of Vampir Cuadecuc. It basically tells the story of he has a very good friend, Pula, who you're introduced to, who invites him along to a family wedding, his cousin's wedding, and his cousin's going to get married, but when the groom turns up, it's an arranged marriage, he's went mad, he's went crazy, and due to the traditions of the people around the time, she can't get married unless she gets married in a specific time frame, or else she will be unmarried for the rest of her life. So they beg Apu to stand into the fore and marry the young lady, Aparna, who is very, very shy, and we don't get to know an awful lot of at the time. And Apu, upon deciding that he's going to do it, is then racked with guilt that he's basically married a girl who actually comes from some wealth, and that he's going to take her back and into pretty much poverty, but part of the promise is that he'll get a job, etc. that goes with the marriage. So that tells the story. Now, I love the third movie. I think they're all absolutely fantastic, and I think as a trilogy they are special, if you want to hear that. But I think a lot of the third movie comes down to how you see the female character Aparna, who he gets married to. That a lot of everything that is good about that movie and that you end up experiencing as a viewer is tied to how much you, as the viewer, fall in love with this character of Aparna. She's spiky, she's spunky, she has a good sense of identity, she's incredibly loyal, she's lovely, and that period of the film, you'll have a smile from ear to ear as you watch it. There's no doubt about it. I mean, she has such an infectious character, infectious presence on the film itself. It reminds me a lot of Almost Famous, if anybody's seen the Cameron Crowe film with Almost Famous, but of Kate Hudson's character. Now, it's not a similar setup, but I think an awful lot of that film is predicated on you fall in love with Kate Hudson's character as much as Patrick Fugit does. So your appreciation of that movie, I think, is tied to that attraction that you see that he feels and that you sort of are made to feel as the viewer. So that you're made to feel as the viewer. And I think that's a similar thing happens in this film. And you get to see Apu transition to be a proper adult with proper, you know, challenging decisions that he needs to make for himself and his life and his family. And I just, like I say, I think the whole thing is pretty special in its own right, and definitely is a set of films that you should check out. The extras in the disc are fabulous. They go into the making of Apu, they go into an appreciation of scene by scene, and a lot of the imagery that happens within those films. So there's a constant image of a train and what the train signifies. There's a constant image of a doorway and how frames transitions from one place to the next as through a doorway, and they are incredibly present in all of those parts and those feelings. So that is the Apu Trilogy, and like I say, I strongly recommend that you go and watch it and pick it up. The film that I want to talk about is a bit of an oddity. It's a second run disc, and it's Vampir Cuadecuc, or Cuadecuc maybe, I don't know, by Parahito Portobello. And this, you've seen some strange conceits and setups for films in your life, but this is something else. It's very much an experimental film about the making of a movie. So there was a remaking or a retelling of the Dracula story, starring who else but Christopher Lee, who I'm sure was coerced into doing it by lots of money, but by Jess Franco was doing this retelling of Dracula, and Parahito Portobello said, well, can I do my own version of it using the same actors and actresses? I'll not get in your way, I'll just kind of film what you're filming, and away it went. So what you get is this retelling of the Dracula story from a film that was obviously quite cheesy. The Dracula version that was originally being shot, but Portobello does this version where he bleaches it all out. It's very much monochrome black and white, but it's a very weird looking film. And I spent it's no long film. I spent the first while of it going, what is this nonsense? Like, completely and utterly, what's the nonsense? And yet, what you get is another telling of Dracula that is completely makes sense. It is engaging. It's very stylistic, incredibly stylistic, but also includes off-camera stuff. So before an actor was going to go on scene, they would look at the camera, give it a wee wink, and then go into the scene. But he includes the bit where it winks at the camera, and because it's a Dracula movie and it's supposed to be creepy, it totally works. Like, it's like, did he ask them to do that, or did they just do that naturally? It's the same with Christopher Lee's character when he comes out of shot and he jumps at the camera playfully, and then he goes into character very, very quickly, and the whole thing is utterly, it's astonishing, to be perfectly honest, and kind of a typical second run in that they're the only label that would have released it, I can imagine. The extras on it, there's a lengthy conversation with Portobello on it that's fantastic. Tells the story of how he came to make it and how nobody would step on his toes, and how it really should never been a film. It was an illegal film in many ways because they didn't get permission to make it properly, other than going to the producer and getting him to sign off on it. And there's a couple of short films as well, and the booklet, as usual in second run releases, is packed full of interesting stuff, including the fact that things that I did not know as you go. So this was a sort of revolutionary film insofar as Cuadecuc, the second part of the title, is actually Catalan in origin. It means the worm's tail, or it often means the end part of the unexposed part of a film. But at the time they were under rule by a dictator, and you weren't allowed to use the Catalan language. You were flailed or banned or otherwise, and he had films banned. In fact, he had his passport taken from him, and even having it as part of the name of the film was rebellion in its own right. And he had films banned in the past for being anti-government or otherwise, and really a fascinating look at what is a 69-minute oddity of a movie, and that's so much to it. I mean, just a fantastic release, and one that after about 20 minutes I was really wondering what the hell I'd spent money on, to being something that I will absolutely watch again. Next up is another movie that comes from a director that was banned in his own country, and that's Fritz Lang's M, one of the classics of the Masters of Cinema range and of Fritz Lang's period. It was his first talkie movie, and this tells the story of a child murder in Germany, and it's a very dark tale of what it was like to live in those circumstances where children were being abducted and killed. Very, very dark. For your first talkie picture to have that as its theme seems very brave in its own right and a bit risky, but it completely pulls it off. I thought I was going to find this very difficult to watch, and it is difficult to watch in ways, but Peter Lorre, who plays the killer, just does an incredible job, and I think there's a couple of interesting themes that run through it. So when there was a child murder, the police presence went way up as they tried to find him, but that created a response of the criminals. I mean, it was very reminiscent of Dr. Mabuse. The films as well, is that there's this criminal underground going all the time and doing their thing, but they found that they couldn't because they were constantly getting raided because they were trying to catch this child killer, and so they were as eager for the child killer to be caught as anybody else, so they started their own investigation, and it creates this lovely dual thing of having, you know, a very strong police investigation which is focused on evidence and, you know, following whatever they could as you would do police work, and then the criminals using their network of trying to find, right, who are these people, and having people on the street, and it's utterly fascinating, and it ends up in this rather magnificent end scene. If you've seen the end of the film, it really just rings in your head as a very memorable piece of cinema, as Peter Lorre tells why he did this or what compelled him to do that. And aside from that, on the release, in the booklet, there are two, well, one's an interview with Fritz Lang and one's a piece of his writing. Like, how special is that? There are some appreciations of doing it in multi-languages and translating to other countries, but there are some extras on this, and one of them in particular is an interview with Fritz Lang where he talks about his filmmaking career, especially in Nazi Germany, and about how he got to meet Goebbels and how Goebbels tried to influence him to work for the Nazi party doing propaganda films, etc. And it's incredibly chilling to hear it, especially from Fritz Lang himself, and how afraid he was. And just for that half-hour conversation, that disc is worth the price all by itself. But you also happen to get one of the great films of all time, and certainly one of the very greatest films from the early 30s. Just magnificent. And then the third film is actually one that was banned, and that's The Nun by Jacques Rivette. And Jacques Rivette is a filmmaker that I'm not entirely familiar with. I have out one over there somewhere. I have some of his films there, but The Nun was the first one that I'd ever watched. And The Nun was banned initially when it was on its release in 1966, I think. And The Nun tells the story of a young lady who is coerced or given to the religious order. So she's made to become a nun because, well, there's various reasons that explained within the film, but she is an illegitimate child of some sort, although not everybody knows that. But her presence creates difficulties for the family, and given that space and time, I think in 18th century France, this is what they did with some of those girls, and they put them into nunnery, and she didn't really want to. In fact, she gets ordained as a nun finally, and she really has no memory of it. So she goes to appeal about giving up her vows and becoming a lay person, and it's about the struggle and the fight back of the church and the people within the nunnery to say, you can't do that, you're a shame to us, and how she's treated. And it has the most incredible performance by Anna Karina in it. If you've never seen her in very much, she is, one, very beautiful, but two, has she's both a strength and a vulnerability in her acting, I think, that translates very, very well to this role. And I mean, it's 2 hours 20 of, I think, utter brilliance in many ways. It's a beautiful movie. It's beautifully shot. It's hard to watch in some places, like an awful lot of the movies that I seem to enjoy are. And it tells the story of her battle and all the different things that she ends up battling against. She's a very young girl, so she hasn't experienced much of life. So some of the things that happen to her, you think, God, she might be able to deal with that, or in many cases, she's not even aware of what people are doing with her and doing to her. And you'll see why the film was banned. I mean, it's a testament actually how much life has moved on. That, like, I could see what it's banned for, but then I couldn't really understand why it was banned. But obviously I didn't place my head in the space of 1966 and what was up around in at that time, and I can see right why. It's an utterly stunning movie. I can't recommend it high enough. Although Jacques Rivette, I think, is also famed for things being quite slow moving and being very thoughtful and pensive. So if you don't like that kind of movie, then maybe it isn't for you. But if you like certainly period pieces that are about more than unrequited love, or those other singular stories that seem to be told in that, this is a bit more involved than that. And then last of all, just to throw in something completely different, I have a HMV premium collection, and it's the first one that I've watched, which is Forbidden Planet. It's Spine number 2, and it's a 1950s sci-fi classic. Well, would be called part of the B-movie range of the sci-fi era, but Forbidden Planet's anything but a B-movie. It has a very young Leslie Nielsen who leads a crew of people down to a planet where Walter Pidgeon lives there with his daughter, and they live in isolation on this alien planet where things have happened in the past but don't seem to be happening anymore. He lives in a very utopian kind of lifestyle. In fact, so much so that he has built his own robot companion that will kind of look a lot like Cogsworth from Fallout, like, not look like it, but that kind of idea of that servant that kind of does anything with super strength. It actually looks more like the Protecticons, or whatever you call those in Fallout. And it's a film way ahead of its time, not only in how it was shot and filmed, because it is a very expensive looking film, I think, for the time, whereas other movies around the time looked very B grade. There's a lot of money being spent in this, and you know, things start to happen. People start to get murdered on the planet. Things start to go a bit weird, and there's the mystery within the film of what happens, and also of the daughter, who has never had an experience of other humans, and how she interacts with all this swathe of male characters as it is that arrive on the planet itself. So there are parts of it that don't age well. I think it's quite a sexist movie in some ways, but a lot of it's played for fun, which kind of helps it a little bit. But a pretty good watch, and certainly you can see, I really love some of the decisions that are within the film about how they would handle some of the special effects. So if anybody's watched a B movie before, usually special effects can age quite badly in movies that have aged, but these ones here don't, and you'll see why as you go through the special features. Special Features has a great documentary with Spielberg and Cameron and Ridley Scott, where they talk about, you know, their experience of B-movie sci-fi around that time, and some of the favourites, and I've seen some of them before. The Incredible Shrinking Man I'd seen a few weeks ago, so it's very prevalent in that as well. And yeah, and there's also another movie as well, which was kind of the follow-up. Another 2 movies actually. Yeah, there's like a TV episode and then another movie with Robbie the Robot in. So sorry for the long episode. If you've made it this far, thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you've seen recently yourself. Aside from that, you know, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and keep on watching great movies, and I'll catch you all again soon. Take care. Bye.